Welcome to Out of the Blue, the podcast, a platform dedicated to celebrating inspirational stories of people from all walks of life overcoming life-changing experiences who have found their way forward. I'm your host, Vernon West, and my co-host for today's episode is my daughter, Jackie West, who, along with being our social media and marketing manager, is a professional musician and Reiki healer. And I also want to thank you, our listeners, for joining us today, for giving us your precious time and attention, because we know just how valuable that is. And please remember to smash that like button and hit that subscribe button, because everything helps to get the word out there. In today's episode, we're thrilled to welcome Kevin Carey, a native of Revere, Massachusetts, now residing in Cape Ann. Kevin is the coordinator of creative writing at Salem State University and the author of 7 acclaimed books. He's here to share the incredible story of a life-altering event that unexpectedly landed him in the hospital, fighting for survival. Kevin will take us through his journey of recovery and how he transformed a traumatic experience into a story of resilience and triumph, thriving as both an award-winning author and an esteemed educator. Hi, Kevin, and welcome to Out of the Blue, the podcast.
Hello, Vernon and Jackie. It's nice to be here. Thank you.
Good to have you. Good to have you.
Yeah.
You know, Kevin, I know we've had a bit of a talk. We know a pretty good idea, but I really have a lot to learn from this. So tell us, to start off with, what really that event that brings you to Out of the Blue, the podcast.
Yeah, it was a Thursday evening, fall of 2019. I was sitting at my desk in my office getting ready to teach in an evening class. I think it was a playwriting or script writing class. And I went to stand up, and the whole room resembled an old Zenith television set, all wavy lines and the whole picture in front of me. I lost sight in one eye temporarily. And so I knew something was going on. And I remember I walked upstairs to the classroom and I said, guys, I think I'm having a stroke. Can someone, call 911? And so they came, and I got rushed to Salem Hospital. And I had managed to call my wife, and my wife and daughter met the ambulance there. And so they did a scan and they thought they saw something in my brain, a blockage in my brain. So by the time they figured that out, the ER doctor said to me, look, there's a medication to clear that blockage. Uh, the problem with the medication is you need to take it an hour from the onset of the incident. And so you have about 5 minutes to make up your mind. And he said, oh, yeah, by the way, a certain percent of people get brain bleeds from this medicine.
Yikes.
So my wife's a former nurse, and she's calling colleagues of her and trying to figure out, should he take this? Should he, And long story short, the doctor came back into the ER and said, I asked him, I said, what would you do? Well, my wife asked him. He said, if you were my father, I'd tell you not to take it. So we didn't take it. And anyways, it didn't. I still had all this funky vision going on. It's kind of like looking through a cheese board or a grate with a bunch of holes.
Wow.
And my sight was coming back in the eye that it had gone out of a little bit. So they kept me overnight, and they had called a neurologist on. There was one on call, but there was nobody in the hospital. And and then one other phone call they made, somebody told them to send me home and to come see an ophthalmologist in the morning, that they knew what this was. So neither of those things sounded very plausible to my wife. Thank goodness she was there. And the next day, I was moved to a hospital in Boston, and they couldn't find out what it was. So I was in there 2 days, and they were sending me home. And then my wife asked the nurse, why does he still have a temperature? So my temp was about 103, and he came back with a thermometer, took it again, and they that's when they decided we'll do a blood culture. And they did the blood culture and they found that I had a bacterial blood infection. And what had happened was a piece of that bacteria flew off in my bloodstream, went through my heart, and lodged in my brain. And that's what caused the stroke incident. Twice, two hospitals were sending me home, right? And they didn't know what it was. And if it wasn't for my wife speaking up for me, I probably would have went home and either bled out or gone into sepsis or whatever. And it's amazing. Once they knew what it was, I had teams of doctors coming in.
Yeah.
Really, the care was great. I had neurologists, infectious disease, MDs, and like they knew how to treat this now that they knew what it was. And the treatment was a PICC line into my vein that went to my heart, and a box of antibiotics that I carried around like a shoulder bag for 8 weeks. It kind of kicked the crap out of me, but it did what it was supposed to do. It got rid of the bacteria in my blood. And, it felt all so surreal, really, until it was almost over. And then I started thinking back on it, like, and I kept running into people and I told them what happened and they'd say, "Oh yeah, my cousin died of that," or "my friend down the block died from that." And when you mention bacterial blood infection, the outcomes are not good
Right.
for a lot of people.
This is true.
So I think if I had really gone home either of those times, I think I would have been in trouble.
Oh, yeah.
So I credit my wife for saving my life, and um,
Yeah.
which she's probably done in more ways than one over the years.
Well, I
But
can, I can, I can agree with that with my case. Yeah. Same thing.
uh, I was a pretty healthy guy. I mean, I had been a big drinker years ago, and I'd stopped drinking for many years. So, once that happened, I became pretty healthy. I really wasn't sick that often. I kind of bounced through life and did most of the things that I wanted to do, and then, bang, this thing just kind of falls in my lap one night sitting at my desk, and nobody knows how I got it. They
No,
don't
that's
know.
I
They
could.
had theories. They wanted to take my gallbladder out, and I said, "Well, was it from the gallbladder?" And they were like, "We don't know, but it could be." And I'm like, I don't think I want to lose body parts if I don't have to. There was we have a theory. We had been down the Cape a couple of weeks before that. I think maybe, let me back up. About 3 years before that, I had gotten this thing called an ocular migraine. It's like an aura in your eye. It lasts about 20 minutes and then it goes away. And I had had a couple of those over the years. And I think I mostly associated them with dehydration if I worked out too much and I didn't drink enough water. But then after we got home from the Cape, I had been swimming in the water. It was after a rainstorm. It was really warm, and I had a hole in my eardrum, and my earplug fell out. And as I was swimming, I looked and I saw a dead fish in the water. So then I got home, and then I had like four of these ocular migraines within 5 days. So our theory is, I don't know if it's true or not, is that I must have got some bacteria from the ocean that went in my ear and into my bloodstream. But the doctors didn't agree with that. They said they didn't see that as being the source. Long story to say, I have really no idea how I got this to begin with, and where it came from, what the onset was, how it got into my system.
It
So
was literally out of the blue,
I mean,
unfortunately.
that's
literally out of the blue. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, it
And
really was.
you could say the ocean, like in what your theory, that would have been out of the blue too, the ocean.
That would have been definitely
But
specifically out of the blue.
yeah, right,
Yeah,
really
yeah,
specifically.
like from the blue.
Yeah, but
from the blue. Yeah,
you know,
yeah,
Or the sky. I mean,
yeah, yeah.
yeah, yeah, it's interesting to hear what your intuition about where this came from goes. You
Well,
know,
it's I think the reason I go there is because it makes me afraid it could happen again if I don't know what caused it.
I agree with that. I
Right?
agree
Yeah.
with that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, maybe I'm doing something right now that caused it and I don't know. So that's, it's crossing the line between fear and paranoia, I guess. It's just um and the thing I think that's the scariest about it is it's a loss of control, right? It's something that's affecting the way you see. I still have a little sight loss in my peripheral vision on that side, and the way they described it to me was um, is that I actually did lose a little sight. The way the brain works with my eyes, and the brain is making up for what should be there. So it if I concentrate on it, it's a little kind of fuzzy, like a camera out of focus, or like a little pixelating video image. And I don't notice it too much anymore. Some lights, if I'm with my head down reading and there's a light over in that corner, it sometimes draws attention to it. But I've just become accustomed to it, and it kind of I can make myself focus on it, and it still freaks me out a little. But most of the time, I just forget about it. So the damage, thankfully, has been minimal. Um, I don't know what it's done to my brain. My brain functioned in strange ways before this, so it's hard to tell
Yeah, I hear that.
what has changed. It's kind of business as usual. It is frightening to think that you're kind of bouncing along and bang, right? And I feel really fortunate and really lucky to have to be able to tell this story where I've run into so many people that tell me of endings
A pretty sad story.
that
Yeah.
pretty sad.
You
So
know, I'm for one. I'm in favor of your intuition. I'm not the doctor here, but I think that uh, in my case, I was also had intuitions about what happened to me. Usually the intuitions are right. I really think that. I think that you probably are right. It probably what happened, and they don't want to say that because it's just something they don't doesn't fit into their what they read on their in their papers and all the stuff that they're using to back up their knowledge.
yeah, I think my wife was an OR nurse for years, and I have so much respect for the medical profession, and I think they're really good at treating what they know, and
Oh, absolutely,
sometimes
absolutely.
sometimes not that great at figuring out what it is they need to treat.
Yeah, I
Um,
really think that's
you
where
know,
there's a blind
and
spot in a lot of the
yeah,
medical profession. Man, let's not forget it's a practice. I always told my
yeah,
doctors, "You were practicing medicine, right? When are you going to get it right?"
yeah,
But though
yeah. So
I love my doctors. I have nothing bad to say about doctors. I mean,
no, I was so impressed with how they handled it after the fact. And I remember the first hospital I was in, the doctor said to my wife, she asked him, um, you don't have a neurologist on staff here. What happens if he bleeds out? And he said, well, we have him on a monitor and we have someone on call. And she said, yeah, but someone on call has to drive here. That's that's an acute event, right? You need somebody dealing with that instantly once that happens.
was that
So
Salem?
that was at Salem, yeah.
Yeah, the smaller
And
And do you,
hospitals, right?
I'm thankful for the ER doctor because he was straight with me, and he seemed a little overwhelmed with it. I mean, and but he gave me the correct advice in the end. So and
Gotta
then
love
when I
those
went
ER
into
doctors. I gotta tell you,
yeah, so much on their plate. And then when I crossed the bridge into Boston, and they were going to send me home, it was kind of like, wow.
yeah, that's disconcert. That's a little disconcerting that they would have been ready to send you home.
But in the end, they did, they saved me.
That's
So
right, they did.
my wife and them.
And you
So
had
yeah,
good
your wife
advocacy.
and
Your
them.
wife was
yeah,
advocating for you. That's amazingly.
yeah, it's so important to have an advocate. I mean, I was out of it. I didn't know.
Oh my God, yeah.
I probably would have agreed to anything.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Just let me get my regular sight back. I don't care what you do.
Yeah.
What
So
what happened, like how did you feel during all of that? when it was happening?
I mean, it was anxiety provoking because I really, I don't know how long my sight was gone in that one eye. It was like a gray kind of fabric, kind of over one of my eyes. And then, like I said, I had this kind of cheese, this like looking through like a cheese grater or something, just a bunch of holes. And that stayed with me for about 3 days. Um, and then it eventually started to fade, and it was just left with that little fuzziness in the corner of my peripheral vision.
So as you move on from this, I think I wonder, there's there's probably I don't want to put the words in your mouth, but what happened? Did you feel like a new kind of look at life, a new kind of uplifting your senses about being appreciative of
Yeah, I
things?
mean, like I said, I was a pretty happy, functioning guy before this happened. But then you just have a newfound appreciation, and you know, then I start thinking of the things that I would complain about, and they seem so silly. They seem so like such a waste of time.
Right.
After the fact, and like I said, I had to wear that bag of antibiotics for 7 or 8 weeks, counting when I was in the hospital, and that kind of really kicked the crap out of me, and I was pretty tired and pretty beat up by the time it was all over, but so thankful to be able to go to sleep without rolling over on an IV line that would send an alarm off
Right.
and wake me up,
Right. Yeah.
little things like that. And I did go back to teach a couple of weeks afterwards with my little suitcase, and but I would teach 2 classes and go home and be exhausted, so you just take good days for granted, I think. And then you realize it after the fact. And um, I'm a pretty accepting, peaceful, happy to be alive person. Twofold from before and after this, because it is kind of a lottery, you know. Um, here we are. We have time to do what what we want to do, what's important to us, how we treat other people, and I think it's just a reminder to use that time wisely and generously, and be there for other people that have traumas in their life, and have events, and because people were there for me,
That's
and I'll
right.
never
That's right.
forget it.
Definitely think I noticed that very strongly that you had your wife there.
Yeah,
Your wife and your daughter. My
yeah,
family is definitely, they kept me on earth, honestly. Jackie, were you
yeah,
going to say
yeah.
something, Jackie?
Yeah, I was thinking about how I guess my generation is millennial, and we're uh I can't really speak for my entire generation, but I definitely feel like millennials and Gen Z are kind of growing up like very solitary. Um, and this is, I'm just thinking about what you're saying about just having, both of you have cultivated families. So you have people like interacting with you on in such a deep way. Um, and there's a lot of work that goes into creating those relationships. Um, and I'm just thinking about AI and
I
um,
think community acts that way too, though.
yeah,
You must see it in the music community. I know Vernon did, and and I have a pretty far-reaching writing community that I lean on and hope that I help too. And teaching does it for me. I feel like I'm really lucky. I've had a lot of jobs in my life that I'd have to drag myself out of bed to get to, and this is not one of them. This is one that I finally got. finally got the dream job at,
Yeah,
the
that's what I
end of
mean.
the road.
Sounds like you're really appreciating your role,
Yeah. And
and it's
I
amazing.
I feel like I can try and help other people just by coming to work.
Hmm.
And I'm
So
sure you do.
I think that's a blessing, really.
So as you were going on from this event and you're getting your vision, you acclimating, you're starting to feel healthy again, then I think it was some other things, any other out of the blue events that were noteworthy following that event? Something to do with a book?
Yeah, I mean, the book had its own kind of I guess that event started well before the trauma
So the
that I had.
overlapping, that's fine.
Yeah, many years ago, my wife and I took my kids to it might have been Mass Smoker or another museum in Pittsfield, and they had this exhibit called Spring Sprockets and Pulleys. It was a bunch of figures made out of recycled material, like life size, human being size, and they would be in little groups. Like you might have a band, and you'd go up and press a button, and they were all connected on pulleys, and they'd move in this kind of syncopated rhythm. And it was fascinating. My kids loved it. I loved it. And I looked over in the corner, and there was this one solitary figure. His name was George. He had a fishing pole, and he had a watering can for a head. And I just started thinking about what would happen if that junk man, I called him, came alive, right? So, I'm percolating the story, and 2 years go by, and I'm in New Jersey. I was in an MFA program, and I look at the Morristown Museum, and the same exhibit is there. So I go again, and again I see that little George in the corner with the fishing pole. And so I started to write this story, uh, a little shameless self promotion.
Oh, no, it's
Um,
fine. We're gonna put the link
yeah,
to that at the end
and
too.
um, and then I had the story. I really liked it. I had an agent that really liked it, and she got great reads at big houses, and they all said wonderful things, and they all passed on. And then I had a second agent who had it for a very short time. She got a few good reads, and then she gave it back to me. And then I had a third agent, and she had it for 2 years, and she got a lot of great reads, and again, a lot of wonderful comments. I had one guy that passed on it, said, "I'll never drive by a junkyard again without thinking of this novel."
But yeah, they
And
pass. Oh,
and then I'm like, "Well, why are you passing on it?" So this was the road for this novel. I think it was about 8 or 9 years from the time I finished the first draft of it, because each agent would dive into more um, edits, and it would get rewritten again. And so I think it was 8 or 9 years, and took it back from the agent that had it, and I started to shop it to publishers on my own, and that's when it landed at Regal House Publishing in North Carolina. And so, I tell students because it's marketed as a middle grade novel, but I think it's a novel for adults too. Um, and but when I go into schools to read it, I just tell kids, look, if you have an idea, if you have something you believe in, don't give up a day before the miracle happens. Just hang in there, and I could wallpaper my house with rejection slips, right, from all the writing that I've done. And I just got one today, on a poetry manuscript. So it's to me, it's like if you believe in it, persevere with it, and something will happen. And I'm really excited that I've had this book came out in 23. It was my sixth book, my fifth book, and I've been able to get around and travel to different states and read in schools. And if I hadn't gone to that museum on that day with my kids and saw that exhibit, and this would have never happened. So I don't know. I think there's kind of signposts out there all the time for us, and if we're open enough to entertain kind of what we think might even be impossible, um, you know, then I think maybe we can follow that intuition to a place that is successful.
Yeah, that summarizes what inspiration really is.
And I was a kid that, when I was younger, I stuttered all the time. I was, um, can I read you a poem about that?
Oh yeah, please do.
Oh,
Yeah. Because I read this to the kids when I go to read the Junk Man, because this is who I was as a kid. This is called getting it right. In grammar school, I stuttered, felt the hot panic on my face when my turn to read crept up the row. Even when I counted the paragraphs and memorized the passage, I'd trip on the first or second word, and then it would be over. The awful hesitation, the word clinging to the lining of my throat, rising only too late to avoid the laughter around me. I was never the smartest kid in the room, but I had answers I knew were right, yet was afraid to say them. Years later, it all came out, flowing sentences I practiced over and over, Shakespeare or Frost, my own tall tales in low-lit barrooms, scribbled in black-bound journals, rehearsing, anticipating my turn, my time, a way of finally getting it right. So
Love it. That was really good.
I read that sometimes before I read The Junk Man to tell kids because it's a story about overcoming obstacles. Junior Miles is a 13-year-old disabled, bullied kid, and he manages to overcome a lot of what's put in front of him.
What's
So
the total name of that book, Kevin?
it's Junior Miles and the Junk Man.
Yeah, that's right.
I sent you one.
I know that. I can't wait to read it.
Yeah, yeah,
So Junior Miles is the lead character, protagonist, right?
yeah, yeah. But basically, what happens in the story is Junior's father dies at the beginning of the novel. He's a junk sculptor. They live on the grounds of a junkyard, and he leaves him this life-size figure in the shed in the back of the junkyard, and it comes alive and sends him on all these journeys, all designed to overcome the grief of losing his father.
Oh, that's what a great idea. Yeah, I love that.
And I'm not even sure how I framed that story like that. My father, I was in my late 40s, I think, when my father died. He and I had a pretty long life together, and but I don't know. There's just something about a story about this kid and his mother kind of hanging on to each other through this that felt right. I graduated from college in 1980, and I worked a bunch of different jobs, and we knew each other in the 80s, Vernie,
Oh yeah.
and and from fry cook to bartender to construction worker, and then one day I had two little kids, and I had dabbled in writing stuff, but it was kind of personal. I wasn't sharing it. And I said, I want to write more. And I started taking creative writing classes at Salem State. And I don't know if you remember Rod Kessler, Jacqueline, do you?
yeah, yeah. He was my advisor or something.
Yeah. So I took a creative writing class, myself and a friend of mine, with Rod Kessler. And then I took every course Rod Kessler taught for the next 2 years. And finally someone said to me, look, you have so many credits, you might as well matriculate and get a master's degree. And I did. And then, but I really wanted an MFA. So I did a low residency MFA at Fairleigh Dickinson in New Jersey. And when I was there, I went for fiction writing, and I ran into all these crazy New Jersey poets, and I started writing this narrative poetry like one I just read to you. And then I got a book published, and then I got a second book and a third book published.
What kind of books were those?
The first three books were
Poetry?
three out of the first four were poetry books. And here I was wanting to be a fiction writer, and all I could publish was poetry. So sometimes the universe decides
Right, right,
that
right.
this is what has to happen first. And my poetry is really narrative. It's not that far removed from sounding like fiction. It's prosy, right? But so I think I was open enough to kind of get out of my own way and just accept what it was that was happening, even though I had grander designs, right? And not that fiction is any more grand than poetry, but I mean, it just, here I was, I'm going to be this fiction writer, and this poetry just kind of took me over. So, and largely because of people I met, this friend of mine, Maria Mazziotti Gillen, who has become a wonderful friend of mine, who I do poetry workshops with twice a year in New Jersey. And I just kept meeting all these really cool Jersey poets. I didn't expect that to happen, you know?
That's what I call like out of the blue, because
Yeah,
you were
yeah,
putting
yeah.
yourself out there. First of all, we have to put ourselves out there. Nothing will happen if you're sitting in your house twiddling your thumbs or going to Dunkin' Donuts and doing the job you don't love and not doing anything about it. You do have to take the chance. And if you don't, nothing ventured, nothing gained, right? I mean, but God helps those who help themselves. I feel like that's really the truth. If you go out and do it, I think something out of the blue will keep you going and will guide you. That's what I see happening to everybody that's been on the show. It's like amazingly consistent that people will find a sort of guiding light, whatever it is. In your case, you just wanted to write.
No, it was great. It was such a learning experience, and I trusted these people I was meeting, and then so I mean, here I was. I had 2 degrees, and I threw my name into human resources at Salem State, and I remember I got a call from the acting chair of the department at the time, and he said, "I have a world lit class open if you want to teach it." And this was on a Saturday. I said, "Yeah, when does it start?" He said, "Wednesday." And I was like, "Holy crap!" So I said yes before I could say no, and before I could think too much about it. And I'd call up friends of mine who were teachers. What's your syllabus? What do you use? And I just didn't have Homer laying around on the coffee table. And so I stayed a week ahead of the students the whole semester. And when it was over, I said, "Wow, that was a blast." Like I really felt like, I mean, here's this kid that couldn't read aloud in school because he stuttered, and now I'm up in front of the class, you know, talking about world lit.
In a
And
college, no less, right? I mean,
yeah,
it's
and
wonderful.
so it just felt like a moment for me, and so I hung in there and worked as an adjunct for many years and got sometimes a couple classes, sometimes three. And I had some filmmaking experience, so every once in a while, a full-time 2-year job would come up, and I would be lucky enough to get that. It's just one step at a time. If you have an interest and you pursue it, something will happen. I mean, when I was a kid, I wanted to play for the Boston Celtics, but I turned out to be 5'8", and so. But I coached basketball for 19 years. Like I stayed connected to the dream a little.
Sure. Yeah.
So I think it's all. I think if you have something in your gut, just let it go where it's going to go, and just stay connected to it however you can, and things will happen that you might not expect. That might be the best things that could ever happen to you. And in this case, teaching at Salem State was that thing for me.
That's again, we're back to the title of the show, Out of the Blue, because essentially, I think what we all come to realize in our lives is just how much of it comes out of the blue. How much of we want things, we go for them, put all our work into them, but we don't really know exactly how it's going to unfold until certain things come our way. And so those are the flags, those are the signposts, and that people listening to our show would realize talk about this stuff. That's it. We want to start the conversation. Till we think about ourselves as not so much that we're in control so much, but the things we're in control of our own self and getting those inspirations and following through on them. I think that's something that makes me think of Anthony Brown, who we had on a couple of weeks episodes, last episode or two, and he was saying that one of the things his higher power told him was finish what you start. Like if you get inspired to do
Yeah, yeah.
something, if you have a dream, like you're saying, if you have a dream like what you said, you should go for it. You shouldn't just be at the bar someday going, I wished I could have done. You should be doing
Yeah.
it. You don't do it.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I mean, I used to be that guy in the barroom saying, "Oh, I know I could be a writer," and then, forgetting that, oh yeah, you have to write to do
Yeah.
that. You
You can't sit here and drink, just building your
know?
next elbow exercise.
There's one thing missing in this, right? Yeah, yeah. You have to actually write to make it
Mhm.
happen,
To be a writer, you must write. The lesson I'm getting, the biggest takeaway for hearing this is that, first of all, it's very inspiring, the journey you've had. And I think that things you got the okay for Junior and the Junk Man, that was after that trauma, wasn't it? When that came
Yeah, it
together?
was. So that was fall of 2019, and that book got published in 2023. You know what, Vernon, I think a lot of it is too is like just being humble enough to like not have all the answers and not really know, but know there's something in your gut that's making you want to pursue this thing, and being open enough to accept some of the signposts that are out there, and you have to kind of get out of your own way sometimes. I had a friend years ago that used to say, "I may not be much, but I'm all I think about." And so I think I have to remember that. Like when I feel like I'm really in charge, it this the universe might have different plans. I think I'm an open enough person that if I start down a road some way and some opportunity uh, jumps out at me, that I'm going to pay attention to it now because I've been lucky enough to have those opportunities come to
Absolutely.
fruition.
Yeah, when you said when something comes your way, you're gonna listen to it now and jump at the opportunity. It sounds like you've been sharpening like your tool like for assessing what's coming your way, like seeing the signposts.
I think maybe I look more for them too.
Yeah.
That I don't think everything is just chance. I think it's, well, wait a minute. I heard that story for a reason, or I listened to that interview for a reason. And I think it actually is kind of comforting to think that, you know, maybe these things are being put in your path, and uh, it's almost disingenuous not to pay attention to. I ended up meeting the guy who had that exhibit. His name is Steve Gerberich. He lives in Newburgh, New York. And I went to his studio, and it's a crazy place. You walk in, he flicks a switch, and there's feet hanging from the ceiling, kicking footballs, and things rotating around. And he's a super nice guy. And I dedicated some of the book to him and told him it was his. So we've met each other in person and hung out, and stay kind of in touch with each other. So, I feel like the art world and the writing world have kind of met in that way, and that's really cool.
Yeah, I love that. I love that. I love that.
Yeah, I just had a movie premiere of that movie,
All right.
and
Tell us all about
and
that.
that
How'd that come out of the blue for
well, there
you?
was a friend of mine. We went to the MFA program together, and we used to laugh and joke about the program all the time because it was, I got a ton out of the program, but there were some things about it that were kind of funky, and we used to always joke around about it. So we decided to write a play
What were the
about,
funky things you wrote that was
well, it was the first year of the program, and there was just, there was some funny people involved in the running of it. And so we used to just joke with each other, and so we wrote this um, play about four MFA students going to a residency, and it turns into a murder mystery. We had a reading. I remember during COVID, we had a reading online with people, and then I approached the theater director here at Salem State, Peter Sampieri, and we were going to stage the play because he had done a play of mine a few years ago up in Newburyport, the active studio. Then the more we talked, the more we said, this would make a fun movie. And so we applied for some grants, and we were lucky enough to get them. And then we went to a retreat house in New Jersey where I teach twice a year with Maria Mazziotti Gillen, and we rented the space. And Peter and I co-directed it, and we went up and shot the movie. in 4 days, and then shot one day in Salem and a couple of pickup days later on. And I've been editing that thing since July. And we had a premiere April 30th, and it was great. We had a sold out theater, and people really thought it was. It's very silly and farcical. There's a lot of puns in it. It's a knock on higher ed. So, if you can't make fun of yourself, right?
I think that's a
So
great thing. Yeah, I want to watch it. Is it streaming anywhere or what?
it'll be available. I'm getting I have to get a print made that can go to the festivals. It's called the DCP. And once that happens, I'll be able to send it to people to see. But so that just started with myself and this guy joking around with each other. So, you said something about finishing stuff. I am good at finishing stuff. Like if I say if I get an idea, and I do collaborate a lot. You'll see one of the books I sent you was a collaboration on uh, this poet, Colleen Michaels, and I. We used to meet after the pandemic and give each other prompts to write poems about the Greek gods. And so we reimagined the Greek gods living in a modern gated community and
I
like up in a
saw that description
big
in your
rich house
books.
on the hill.
That sounds
And
interesting.
here I go, shameless self promotion.
Oh,
That's called
please.
Olympus Heights.
That's what, if we're not, we're all about
Yeah,
that.
yeah,
We have
yeah.
no shame on Out of the Blue. No
I
shame.
sent you one of those too. But that was a blast, and we were friends, and we didn't expect anything to happen with that really. And then we published a couple of them individually, and then we found a publisher who wanted it. So um, really, it just came about generically, just a couple of poet friends getting together because now people were back out and going to coffee shops again, and it wasn't the lockdown pandemic anymore. So something bad led to something good again. So I'm a
Again,
fortunate guy, really. I just, but once I have a project in my hands, I do want to finish it. I don't feel like I've done the idea justice just by playing around with it. You
yeah,
know?
I
Mm.
agree with that.
Mhm.
It's like
Yeah,
when things come, inspirations come out of the blue. I mean, first of all, you get a sickness, a trauma out of the blue, and you try to use that to, first of all, inspire you to get through it, inspire you to learn how to deal with it, and you learn things about love and connection that are very valuable in your whole human experience. But then what I take away from you, Kevin, is you've also developed a real keen eye to see those out of the blue things coming. It's like I think the more keyed in you get to the wavelength that is out of the blue, the more your life becomes full of these wonderful experiences where you meet somebody and through joking about the program begets an idea for a movie.
yeah. It's just you go home and write about Zeus, and I'll go home and write about Hera, and then all of a sudden we have two poems, and then we start thinking, hey, maybe this is something. And then it just grows out of that kind of generic chance meeting of a friend and writing something down.
Anybody that's an artist really relates to this a lot. But I do think that normal people, not just artists, have definitely the ability to do this, to be able to
Well, I've
psych
been
into
called a
it.
lot of things, never normal.
No, I think once you become an artist of any kind, you left that behind. You're going to be a little quirky compared to everybody
Yeah,
else.
I think I just really like, you know, uh, I like collaborating with other artists. I mean, there are times I like not collaborating. There's times I just want to embrace something on my own. But I think you learn a lot by trying to work with other people, even if it's, you know, uh, even if it's frustrating at times. It's kind of like you learn the act of give and take.
I think when I was younger, if I got an idea, it was a little harder for me to collaborate. I felt like, oh no, you're going to hurt my idea. But as I go older and wiser, I start to love collaboration. And it really, when I tuned into it and became really loved it, is when first stage of my life success began to happen. What I loved about any kind of writing I've ever done is this all collaboration. So much
Yeah.
collaboration, especially when it comes to writing a screenplay or getting into something that's going to be a performance. It's a huge collaboration. Everybody, even the actors would collaborate. They could change their
Yeah,
lines
yeah,
because
yeah.
I don't think they say it that way. You know what I mean? So there's a
No, I
collaboration.
know. It's, years ago, I would write something, I'd want to give it to somebody to read, and I'd be thinking to myself, just tell me how much you like this. And then, because my ego wasn't ready for all the rejection that comes with it. But, now it's like, I just say, be honest, tell me what you think,
Right,
and,
right. Collaboration
and,
is that really. It's about
yeah, yeah.
learning to understand that a criticism is a negative thing. It's
No,
it's a,
no.
it's a help. It's aid.
Yeah, and I think if you're going to be, open enough to let somebody read or look at or view something that you've done, then you have to allow them to be honest in what they think about it. And you don't have to agree with it all. I always say this to my students. Look, if you're in a writing workshop and you get five different opinions, well, you go home and do what you want. You don't need to embrace everything that everybody else tells you, but be open enough to listen to it because it might lead you to do something that makes it better.
Yeah, I can expand your view, your
Yeah,
yeah, because
definitely.
people see
Yeah.
things differently. We're we're not speaking the same language most of the time.
Yeah, and plus we're so into it, right? We're in that little closed space in our mind about this is my thing, right? And you have to give that thing away. I mean, I'm always telling my students that if you write something and publish it, it's none of your business anymore. It's what the readers think about it, right?
Mm, yeah.
So someone could totally misinterpret your poem or your essay or your piece of fiction. That's fair game. That's what they got out of it, right?
Yep.
So you really do have to uh, try and control the ego and just tell it to go back where it came from, and just be open enough to kind of embrace different opinions that you wouldn't come up with on your own. Like you said, it can nourish it. It can make it something better, something different.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I mean, I've written a lot of songs in my life, and it's to me, I look at a musical inspiration as sort of something coming out of the blue, I used to say out of the mist, and it would come more and more clear to me. But when I got
I might say out of the shadows, but
out
that's
of the
okay.
shadows, but I like that too. But as it comes through, when you have stop putting it on paper or recording it or whatever you're doing, yeah, you're going to bring in extra people and they're going to help solidify that, get it clearer. And you know when they're giving the kind of the right feedback, you can feel it. Because actually what we're talking about here is something that's called an idea. I mean, it's intangible and it's totally out there. And where our job as an artist or a writer, any kind, is to make that thing something that other people can touch, feel, see, and hear. And you hope it transforms, it's transformative. You hope that when they see or hear, read it, or whatever, that they connect with the wavelength of what you think is the message is, but you have no control over that. And that's the baffling part. I used to hear all kinds of interpretations of songs, and I personally knew what they were about, but they weren't about that to this other person.
Yeah, yeah. Well, that was my little joke about Ghost in the Shadows. So,
I know that. I think that
yeah.
yeah, Jackie, Kevin, we did a video with both Ghost in the Shadows as one of our songs.
I love that video.
Yeah, so we just used it. I actually collaborated with a photographer from Salem State named Stephanie Young and an old Revere person, Jennifer Martelli. Do you
I know
remember
Jennifer.
her?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Well, Jennifer's a poet too. So we wrote poems to Stephanie's photographs. And again, here I go.
Shameless
And this book
promotion. I'm gonna
and
put
this
a
and
we'll put a blinking sign. Shameless promotion.
Yeah, and
Shameless
and
promotion.
this book came out of it, but it was a photography exhibit with 14 beautiful photographs of Revere Beach. And then our poems acted as kind of placards, like information cards next to the photograph. And we just had it in the gallery here at Salem State, and it's going to be at the Mass Poetry Festival in the Peabody Essex Museum on the 30th, May 30th. It's again just another chance collaboration. Stephanie had showed me some photographs, and I said, "Wow, I wonder what these would look like with poems." And I pulled Jennifer in, and 2 years later, we end up with a book and an exhibit.
I'm just going back a little bit. I'm glad that you collaborated with your wife to not collaborate with that bacteria.
Yeah, yeah, that's well put. Yeah, it is. You know, and again, it isn't just my. I mean, I trusted what my wife was thinking, and because left to my own devices, I probably would have made the wrong decision, and that's emblematic of a lot of my life.
I would say that's a perfect way to describe.
Making the wrong decision left to my own thinking,
Right.
where when I've leaned on other people to explore it and talk about it and come up with a decision collaboratively, I've usually made a better decision.
And it's the key point of that Jackie pointed out was that, it was with your wife whom you trusted. That's an important part of the collaboration, to
Yeah,
have that
yeah.
full trust with each other. And when you're in that space, anything's possible. You'll complete the work, I think. Everything you do will be completed, to the best it can be.
Or trust, respect, like respect first
Respect
there.
is even more important, I think, because well, I think you have to have both. You definitely have
That's
to have
Yeah,
both.
I mean, if you don't respect someone, it's hard to trust them, right? You're
Right.
always thinking of why you don't respect them,
Yeah,
right?
exactly.
And that this information is not going to be what I need because I don't respect this person.
Right.
But,
You
yeah.
don't know where it's coming from.
I mean, I remember when I was in that MFA program, I was still focused on fiction, but you had to take a crossover genre. So you had to take a genre in something else. So I took poetry, and this poet, rest his soul, Bill Zander, I wrote this poem about being on a train going to New York at a crazy time in my life, and uh, and he read that poem and he said, "This poem's a keeper." And I remember saying, "Wow, this guy's a pretty good poet. He's telling me this poem is a keeper," and that became a title poem to the first book I ever published. I don't know if that would have happened without him saying that. So I always remember that as much as I'm trying to correct student writing, or the bigger part of the job is encouraging it, right? Is saying this is I really like what you're doing here, and maybe think about working on this part of it. But because you never know what little piece of encouragement can do to somebody, and just make you feel kind of worthy and that you're on the right track and that you're doing something that is working, right? And
Absolutely.
sometimes it is just a kind word of encouragement more than anything else that can keep you going.
Especially being at the start of something,
Yeah,
you
yeah.
know, it can be really fragile to be there.
Yeah, I mean, it can be daunting to think about the whole process, but if you have one poem or one story that someone says, you know what, this is really good, then you can build on that. And I think that's what happened to me. It's like I had people along the way saying they liked what I was doing, and without that, I might have given up a long time ago.
The takeaway from this for me, I guess, hopefully our audience, and is that first of all, you already were developing collaboration skills in your writing adventure, but that key collaboration that day in the emergency room
Yeah,
may have been it's the reason we're talking right now.
yeah, because a lot of it happened post that. I can't be more grateful than I am that it happened the way it happened. Uh, I don't wish it happening to anybody, but
Right.
it's scary and it's frightening, and but I'm just so grateful that I was able to kind of get lucky enough to get treated in time, um, and gave me time to do more work, right? To
And
have more fun, to
that's what
teach
we
more
got from
students.
Kevin Carey,
Yeah.
is a incredible body of work that's getting better every day. And I predict the Junkman book. I think it's a great movie idea.
Well,
And not to
from your
mention,
lips to God's ears, hopefully.
God listens to me, right? Right, God?
That's a funny one.
No, he's gonna be shut the F up.
I've never heard that before.
What, you never heard that expression?
No.
Well, that's because you're dealing with two old guys here. It's like,
I'm always coming up with them. She says, "Where'd you get that one?"
No, but that's a funny expression. I like it.
yeah, yeah.
I think we're we could probably say that what a great episode this has been, Kevin. And
Thank you for asking me to do this. I'm really really touched that you thought of me, and
well, I'm thrilled you're
Jackie, it's
here,
great
and
to see you again.
great to
Good
see
to
you
see
again.
you too.
Just to let everybody know, there'll be some great links at the end of the podcast that you can look up, dive deep into Kevin's books and everything like that. And when that MFA, the terminal degree, comes out, you got to make sure you see it. And I'm sure if you get in touch with us, stay on this, we'll definitely update you when things like that come along from our Out of the Blue podcast site. So thank you so much, Kevin. We so much appreciate you here today. Really was a wonderful, wonderful episode. Very inspiring. And I mean, I learned a lot too. I mean, I always learn, but I learned a lot. And I continue to learn from these episodes, especially with someone like you. And
Well,
yeah,
thank you.
I'm gonna be calling you about some stuff regarding some books and some
That's right. We have another
we're
collaboration
collaborating
going
on
on.
something.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
speaking of getting things made into movies and stuff, we're gonna start exploring that very soon.
yeah.
Because
I'm ready to go.
I definitely have some context out there we got to use. So,
Okay.
and anyway, so anybody listening, thank you so much for joining us. Smash that like button and hit the subscribe button because every little bit helps, and we certainly need your loving help. Thank you so much, Jackie. Thank you so much, Kevin. So
All
much.
right.
Gracing
Peace,
our screen
everybody.
today.
See ya.
Bye-bye, everybody. Out of the Blue, the podcast, hosted by me, Vernon West, co-hosted by Jacqueline West, edited by Joe Gallo, music and logo by Vernon West III. Have an Out of the Blue story of your own you'd like to share? Reach us at info@outoftheblue-thepodcast.org. Subscribe to Out of the Blue on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts, and on our website, outoftheblue-thepodcast.org. You can also check us out on Patreon for exclusive content.